It could be argued that everyone has a black sheep in the family. If you don't think yours does, then it's probably you. And this is still the case, even if you are the most famous family dynasty in the world of popular music. For a time period at least, if one name was uttered to any member of the Jackson family, the words, "What now?" would evidently follow. That name being LaToya. Constant comparisons, lackluster chart positions, and ballooning tabloid controversies. This is the story of the Jacksons' wayward child. Her turbulent relationship with his superstar brother Michael, as well as her extensive showbiz family. In this multi-part documentary series, we'll explore LaToya's attempts to break away from her family's control, to echo her brother's success, and gain her own independence. A journey several decades in the making, taking her down many regretful, often bizarre and misguided paths in the process. Here's the detail. You don't know Jack. By the mid-1980s, LaToya Jackson's life couldn't have been further away from what she had envisaged in her youth. From studying business law to becoming a reluctant performer in her teens, LaToya was fast approaching 30 and still struggling to replicate a similar level of success as a performer than that of her brother Michael and sister Janet. Desperate to move away from her father's control over her life and career, LaToya would be granted that release through the connection of another man, Jack Gordon. A former carnival operator, Gordon began working with Joseph Jackson, assisting him in his finances as well as the patriarch's various business projects. LaToya asserts that, initially, her family's relationship with Jack was a positive one. Quote, "Jack and my father became fast friends, making it all the more surprising that I liked him. However, it wouldn't take long before that relationship turned sour. After numerous background checks, it was discovered that Jack had served a 4.5-month prison sentence back in 1981, having been convicted of bribery charges while doing business in Las Vegas. Given the Jackson family's paranoia regarding outsiders, you'd think all ties with Gordon would be immediately severed. However, after consideration, it was Joseph of all people who decided to retain his ties with the businessman. Quote, "My father reasoned that, for one thing, he hadn't been convicted of committing a violent crime. He'd paid his debt to society," LaToya claimed. Whilst Jack was in, so was Joseph, and his volatile behavior and reputation in the entertainment industry continued to be a poisoned chalice for LaToya. In 1985, meetings had been arranged by Gordon for LaToya to discuss potential film roles with a powerful figure in Hollywood. However, the agent clearly stated after prior experience working with Joseph, quote, "We can work with LaToya only if he is not involved." Upon finding out, the Jackson patriarch proceeded to rage down the phone to the agency, and therefore LaToya's proposed entry into the movie business was promptly stifled. After years of feeling oppressed under her father's control, LaToya continued to struggle to find a way out, with even Michael telling her, quote, "The day you break away from Joseph, everyone will know who you are." Confiding in her new ally, Jack Gordon, the businessman eventually spoke directly with Joseph, pleading with him to let her go managerially. Initially reluctant, Joseph would eventually compromise, agreeing only if it was a 50-50 split in profits, but Gordon would have full managerial control. Despite this promise, Joseph was still hell-bent on exerting his control over his daughter during a promotional trip to Japan, when matters took an even darker turn. LaToya has since claimed that after overhearing Jack complain to Joseph that he was still interfering with her career, she grabbed her new manager's sleeping pills. Determined to overdose, Gordon came in and stopped her. Quote, "Looking back, I know now that I didn't really want to die. What I wanted was for the constant pain and hurt to stop," LaToya reflected. After informing Joseph of his daughter's mental state, the news reportedly shook up the Jackson patriarch, who then once again agreed that he would stay out of LaToya's affairs. Joseph then agreed to lose his 50% stake in their contract, after which LaToya would be solely managed by Jack Gordon, and, in a business sense at least, she would finally be free from her father's overbearing authority over her life and destiny. However, throughout these tumultuous few years, LaToya retained a close relationship with her brother Michael, who by 1987 was finally gearing up for the release of his much-anticipated follow-up to thriller, Bad. LaToya would even appear in another one of Michael's music videos for its third single, The Way You Make Me Feel, and would follow in his philanthropic footsteps by becoming one of the spokespeople for the much-publicized anti-drug campaign Just Say No, led by then First Lady Nancy Reagan. But whilst LaToya remained busy, she claimed that around this time, her own father was constantly threatening to hamper her career should she grow more distant from him. Quote, "I couldn't believe anyone would do this to their client, much less to their own flesh and blood." It was clearer than ever to LaToya that she had to get out of the family home, and fast. Fleeing the nest. Leaving the family's Havenhurst estate had always proven to be a near impossible task for LaToya in the past. Whether it was because of the pleas from her mother or the threats from her father, the feeling of isolation and entrapment only continued to grow within her. The last straw came after a particularly violent altercation between her father and manager Jack Gordon, with their relationship continuing to grow sour amidst Jack's increased involvement. Joseph's short temper apparently manifested in a severe beating, which also resulted in LaToya being hurled against a wall when attempting to help her manager leave. She claimed, quote, "At that moment, I knew I would never come home again." In May 1988, LaToya, together with Jack Gordon, flew to New York City, eventually settling in an apartment at Trump Park, Manhattan. Now residing on the other side of the country, LaToya expressed a desire to learn and experience everything that the Big Apple had to offer, rekindling the sense of freedom her and Michael enjoyed living together in the city a decade ago. A few months after moving, her dramatic flight made it into some corners of the press, with LaToya giving interviews into why she left home. In USA Weekend, she said, quote, "I have to live my own life, even if I make mistakes. It's my turn to do what I want." In regards to her father, she told the Chicago Tribune, quote, "I had to get out of that situation because I had no say-so in what was being done." Part of her new life included a new album, distributed by RCA. You're Gonna Get Rocked was largely produced by two of the most recognizable names in the pop scene at that time, hip-hop pioneers Full Force and the British pop powerhouse of stock, Aitken and Waterman. Despite the two styles being vastly different, the album received some positive praise, reportedly selling 100,000 copies in Germany alone. Whilst her European popularity remained the strongest, LaToya was also building her presence on the East Coast music scene, performing several shows at the Trump Castle Casino. Emerging on, quote, a black motorcycle amid smoke and lasers, decked out in skin-tight black leather and a rhinestone-studded top, LaToya's new provocative look and tough cookie attitude was a shock for the press and her entire family, who found it hard to believe that this was the same woman from a decade earlier, who was so averse to anything sexual or even remotely promiscuous. Although her new image wasn't indicative of any more of a relaxed attitude regarding sex and relationships, as demonstrated when comedian Eddie Murphy reportedly grew frustrated at LaToya's polite refusals to his dinner invitations, the starlet stating, quote, "Eddie's incredibly talented, but I was put off by his reputation as a notorious womanizer and confirmed bachelor." Although LaToya was no stranger to having celebrities lust over her, back in 1980, Prince approached her at a roller skating party, claiming to be madly in love with her. Instead of engaging positively or negatively, LaToya merely said, quote, "Well, I hope you have a nice time tonight," before skating off. A few years later, at the 1984 Grammys, she encountered Julio Iglesias, whom she was a fan of. At the event's after-party, the singer began kissing LaToya intensely before sitting her on his knee and complimenting her. Despite her admiration for his music, the situation made LaToya extremely uncomfortable, with the Jackson sister claiming, quote, "Moments like this reminded me how little I knew about life." By 1988, she still had celebrities pining over her, particularly the boxer Mike Tyson. Having met after one of his fights, Tyson and LaToya struck up a friendship over the phone, the athlete showering her with affections frequently. However, after experiencing marital issues with Robin Givens shortly after their union, Tyson reportedly told LaToya, quote, "I married Robin because you wouldn't say anything to me. LaToya, if you had shown just the least bit of interest in me romantically, things would be different." As she built a life in New York, LaToya's already strained relationship with her family further deteriorated. However, there was always one sibling who she could count on, that being Michael. After both Jacksons were in Germany on different engagements, LaToya traveled to see Michael's show as part of the Bad World Tour. Back at the hotel, the two were able to spend some time together. LaToya remembering, quote, "We didn't discuss business at all. Just gossiped, reminisced, and laughed." A few months later, a frantic and distressed Michael would call LaToya. Allegedly, his manager, Frank DeLeo, had informed Michael that Jack Gordon was tied up with gangsters, and that if any of those gangsters didn't get paid off, Michael's life would be forfeited. Having become increasingly paranoid as his superstar status rose, Michael had every reason to panic after hearing this alarming report, but LaToya viewed it very differently. She saw this as yet another attempt from her family to try and paint Jack Gordon as the devil. By this point, everything Jack had done for LaToya had seemingly been for the better, especially when compared to her father's management. This included the provocative new image, her new album cover in particular drawing outrage from certain family members. Citing her brother Jermaine and her mother Catherine as the prime instigators of this disapproval. Her immediate response, albeit as a thought in her head, quote, "Wait until they see what's coming next." The problem with Playboy. Even though LaToya had taken herself away from her family in the immediate sense, by late 1988 she still didn't feel fully emancipated. She longed to find some way to convince her family that she was living her own life, with no desire to return to the one she occupied at the family's home back in California. The definitive action she ultimately chose was Playboy magazine. After being contacted by them directly, months of secretive negotiations began, ultimately resulting in LaToya becoming one of the highest-paid artists to ever appear in the magazine's topless editorials. Whether or not she attained pole position in that claim has been up for debate. Jack Gordon claiming at the time that, quote, she was the highest-paid girl in the history of the magazine. Whereas a spokesperson for Playboy, Elizabeth Norris, clapped back by stating, quote, "Those reports are just not true. The only thing we can say is that she was paid very well, but it wasn't the most we've ever paid." As a result of the exclusive edition being published in March of 1989, LaToya's public profile skyrocketed. In terms of commercial success, this was surprisingly the biggest achievement of her career up until that point, becoming the biggest selling issue in Playboy history. Quite predictably, certain members of the Jackson clan were furious. No more so, it seemed, than Jermaine, her older brother even making an appearance on Entertainment Tonight claiming his sister had posed for Playboy, quote, "because I couldn't get a hit record and couldn't sing." However, when it came to her closest sibling Michael, he supported her, and also was able to dissect the potential reasons as to why LaToya posed for Playboy in the first place. Quote, "You did it to get back at Joseph, to let him know he can't tell you what to do, to tell him that you're grown now and can make your own decisions." Her brother's assertions appeared to have been correct, with LaToya even disclosing to the press that, quote, "It was a step to show them that I wasn't 12 anymore, that I'm over 21, and that it's my own life." Regardless of what LaToya wanted to show or prove, Catherine only saw red. After several frustrated and cold-toned phone calls, LaToya would eventually confront her mother, asking what had changed in their relationship, not expecting a matter as trivial as a few provocative photographs to be the final nail in the coffin for their already strained bond. When Catherine couldn't provide any sort of answer to LaToya's questioning, she remarked, quote, "This wasn't about love. This was about control." Joseph, on the other hand, had no response to the paparazzi surrounding the Playboy scandal, perhaps indicating that the move was successful in finally proving to her father that he held no influence over her life anymore. She was now free from the gilded birdcage she claimed to be trapped in for years. However, the cost of liberation also came the feeling of being an outsider as a result. For example, for the Jacksons' 1989 track 2300 Jackson Street, all the brothers and sisters, including Michael, were to feature in some way. All except LaToya. Though she claims that some of her brothers had originally reached out to her so that her vocals would be featured, when a planned visit from Jermaine to New York yielded no meeting and no recording, the single went out without her input. However, this wouldn't be the last time that LaToya would feel excluded from family-centric events, and as the 1990s dawned, it would prove to be a decade of both creative ambition, but also one filled with scandal, sex, and a whole lot of controversy. Join us for part 3 as we explore LaToya Jackson's vicious turn against Michael and the rest of her family, as she made another transformation into the tabloid junkie, with her manager Jack Gordon acting as puppeteer. Thanks for watching The Detail. We'll see you next time.